Today, we talk about a powerful war chief from the pre-colonial era, a man whose name made kings kneel before him, while the gods trembled in fear when they heard his name. His name was Bashorun Gaa, and his rise shook the very foundation of the mighty Oyo Empire. What happens when the one meant to protect and serve the crown becomes stronger than the crown itself? Welcome to the story of Gaa, the man who ruled from the shadows. A long time ago, before the arrival of Europeans in Africa, there was a mighty empire called Oyo. This was a kingdom in the heart of West Africa, inhabited by the Yoruba people. The Oyo Empire was one of the strongest and most respected in the region. People in nearby lands feared and respected it as many smaller kingdoms paid tribute to the empire, sending endless gifts to show loyalty. At the top of the kingdom was a king called the Olophin. The people believed the Olophin was a divine ruler chosen by the gods. He was not just a ruler, but also a spiritual leader. Although the Olophin was very powerful, he did not rule alone. He had the help of a council to assist him in his administration. This council was called the Oyo, which consisted of 7 prominent ministers. The leader of the Oyo was called the Bashorun, and he was the second most powerful man in the empire, right after the king. The Oyo could even remove the king if they believed he was no longer fit to rule. If the king was doing wrong, they would give him a calabash, either empty or with a parrot's egg inside. This was a message which meant that the people, the land, and the gods had rejected him. After that, the king had to step down and take his own life. This structure made the kingdom strong as it created a system of checks and balances. But like every great empire, Oyo began to fall, and its problems started with one man, Bashorun Gaa. Gaa came from a powerful family, as many of his ancestors had been Bashorun before him. He was trained in war, diplomacy, and politics. Some people even believed that he had magical powers. As a young man, Gaa was a brave and strong warrior who defended the empire from many enemies and rebels that threatened the stability of the land. He also helped stop robbers and bandits that raided the people, and because of this, the people of the Oyo Empire loved him. So when he became the head of the Oyo in 1750, nobody was surprised. But once Gaa got that power, he was no longer the same man. As Bashorun, he was supposed to guide the kingdom and help assist the king in running matters of the state. But instead, Gaa used his new power to take control of the empire. Gaa was Bashorun for 24 years, and during this period he enthroned 5 kings and dethroned 4. Although Gaa wasn't the one wearing the crown, he was surely the one ruling the empire. The first king Gaa removed was Labisi. Gaa had chosen him, thinking a young and inexperienced man would be easy to control. Labisi had grown up with friends and teachers who taught him what it meant to be a true king. When he took the throne, they reminded him to lead with courage and rule as a king should. But Gaa saw this as a threat. To him, their words meant they wanted Labisi to take power from him. So Gaa acted quickly. He had the king's friends and teachers removed from position of authority. Some were banished, while the others were killed. Labisi was left alone, with no one to guide or support him. And after just 17 days as king, he took his own life. Next, Gaa picked Biorju and made him the new king. At first, things went smoothly since the king followed Gaa's lead and command. But one day, a group of men committed a grave offense, and some villagers came to the palace to report it, begging the king to help them seek justice. The king, hearing of their atrocities, decided to punish the criminals. But these criminals had sworn loyalty to Gaa, and Gaa stepped in to protect them. Biorju stood firm and claimed that the crimes of these men were too great to ignore and refused to let them go unpunished. Gaa saw this as a challenge to his power. To him, the king was no longer obedient. He met with the council in secret and told them he had decided to remove the king. The Oyo, though uneasy, since Gaa had just dethroned a king few days earlier, kept silent, fearing his anger. Together, they went to the palace and presented the king with a calabash containing a parrot egg, a symbol that the land and its people had rejected him. With no allies left and no place to run to, Biorju took his own life, becoming the second king to die because of Gaa. Hagbaluhije became the 3rd king under Gaa's tenure. Unlike the others, Hagbaluhije ruled for 20 years, the longest reign during Gaa's time. His rule brought a rare calm to Oyo. Trade flourished, farms yielded bountiful harvests, and the people enjoyed prosperity and peace. For a time, it seemed that Gaa had found a king he could live with. But even Hagbaluhije could not remain beyond Gaa's reach forever. After years of steady rule, the king decided it was time to mark his success. He announced the Bebe Festival, a grand Yoruba celebration held only after a king had ruled for many peaceful years. The people rejoiced, and guests came from far and wide. Among the honored visitors was Hagbaluaje's dear friend, the king of Popo. But during the celebration, the king of Popo arrived in garments that rivaled the Oliphant's own, rich flowing robes that glittered in the sun. It was like a guest wearing a white gown to a bride's wedding, disruptive, shameful, and bold. To many, it was nothing more than the king of Popo flaunting the wealth of his kingdom. But to Gaha, it was an open insult, a huge disrespect, and a direct challenge to the sacred Oyo's throne and authority. Gaha was furious. Without delay, he declared war on the king of Popo. But Hagbaluaje refused to let his personal friend be harmed over what he saw as a misunderstanding. He pleaded with Gaha to reconsider, urging peace and explaining that it was not intentional. Gaha would not bend. So Hagbaluaje did what he thought was right. He secretly sent word to the king of Popo, warning him to flee his land before Gaha's army arrived. That one act of kindness was all Gaha needed. He turned to the Oyo and accused the king of siding with someone who had mocked the throne. The council, already too used to Gaha's control, did not resist. They claimed Hagbaluaje had betrayed Oyo and was no longer fit to rule. The end came swiftly, and the Oyo brought the ritual calabash once again to the palace. Hagbaluaje accepted his fate and took his own life, becoming yet another Oliphant brought down by Gaha's will. Majiobe, Hagbaluaje's brother, became the next Oliphant. He was filled with hatred for Gaha, knowing what the man had done to his brother and the other kings. Majiobe vowed to stop Gaha, but by now, Gaha had become more powerful than ever. His sons were grown and had taken up positions of power. They acted like tyrants, stealing from the people, punishing anyone who spoke against them, and using their father's influence to escape the consequences. Even when the people cried out against the corruption and atrocities, Gaha stood firm in defending his sons. Anyone who dared speak the truth or slander them was swiftly punished. The corruption spread deep into Gaha's family. His sons took taxes meant for the kingdom and the empire's treasury, using it for their own gain. During this time, one of Gaha's wives was accused of plotting to poison him. In response, Gaha wiped out her entire family in brutal retribution. Majiobe knew the danger he faced. Gaha had already removed 2 kings and his own brother. He feared the same fate would soon be upon him. So, Majiobe began to plan ahead. He met with charm men and herbalists, fortifying himself with powerful charms and potions. He secretly gathered a group of loyal men, preparing for the inevitable battle. But Gaha was quick to learn of Majiobe's preparations. However, he knew that deposing the king would not be as simple as it had been before. The people had come to respect Majiobe, and the ministers were loyal to him. Any move against the king would spark outrage within the empire. So, Gaha waited, watching for the right moment to strike. That moment soon came. Majiobe's son was provoked in a part of town, where a confrontation with one of Gaha's men escalated into a violent altercation. The situation quickly spiraled into a riot. Gaha seized the opportunity, declaring that Majiobe must surrender his son for the damage caused to the people. Majiobe refused, and this act of defiance gave Gaha the justification he needed. With no further hesitation, Gaha sent soldiers to the palace. Majiobe fought back fiercely with the men he had gathered, but in the end, he was overpowered and killed. Before his death, Majiobe took one final act of defiance. He poisoned Gaha. Though the poison did not kill him, it left Gaha weakened, paralyzed in parts of his body. Gaha had survived, but the sting of Majiobe's final blow would never fully leave him. The next king to rise was Olafin Habiodun, the 5th and final king chosen by Gaha. Like all the others, Habiodun was filled with fear at Gaha's power. But unlike his predecessors, Habiodun was not willing to remain passive for much longer. Something terrible happened that would change the course of event. Gaha, in need of a deer for a ritual meant to boost his mystical powers, searched far and wide, but could not find one. Frustrated, he turned to his charm man for guidance. The charm man told him that while a deer would be useful, the ritual would be even more powerful if a human of noble or royal blood were used instead. Such a sacrifice, he said, could increase Gaha's powers, and if the person had royal blood, it could even extend his life. Without hesitation, Gaha began to consider his options. One name came to mind, Hagboin, one of his wives. But she was no ordinary woman. She was the daughter of King Habiodun. Gaha had married her not out of love, but to keep the king under control, binding Habiodun through fear and alliance. Now, hearing that a royal blood would not just boost his powers, but increase his lifespan, Gaha made his decision. He chose to sacrifice the king's daughter. This cruel act was more than Habiodun could bear. He had watched Gaha's reign with growing anger, but this was the final straw. Abiodun pretended to fall ill, and when no one was watching, he secretly left the palace. He traveled to a nearby village and sought out Oryabi, a commanding general in the Yoruba military. He confided in Oryabi, revealing the truth of what had happened and asking for his help. Oryabi, hearing of the atrocities of Gaha, pitied the king and agreed to help him. In 1774, King Abiodun and Oryabi, with the help of loyal warriors, launched their attack. They marched to Oyo, Gaha's stronghold, and fought their way into the heart of the city. Gaha's forces fought back fiercely, but they were no match for the combined might of Abiodun's army. Gaha was captured and dragged to the village market square, where he was tied to a pole and burned alive. The people burned him alive because they thought if they just killed him, he might resurrect and come back to life. This was how much they feared Gaha. As he burned, Gaha cried for mercy, but none was given. His reign of terror had caused too much pain for anyone to show compassion. After Gaha's death, Abiodun moved swiftly to restore order. He ordered the execution of many of Gaha's supporters, hoping to quell any remaining rebellion attempt. While this helped end the immediate threat, it also weakened the Oyo army, as many of the kingdom's strongest warriors had been loyal to Gaha. In the years that followed, other states within the empire began to pull away. Oyo's strength was no longer what it had once been. Though the empire did not fully collapse until 60 years later, the seeds of its downfall had been planted. Abiodun's reign, however, brought some semblance of peace and stability. He ruled with wisdom, and the people began to recover from the wounds of Gaha's rule. 2 years after Gaha's death, Abiodun invited Oryabi to the capital to thank him for his loyalty and support. But tragedy struck during the journey. Oryabi died before he could arrive. Despite this loss, Abiodun continued to lead Oyo with a steady hand. He ruled for many more years, until his death in 1789. People remember him as the king who brought calm after the storm, restoring some measure of peace to a kingdom that had suffered under Gaha's cruel reign. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.